movie. A travel show with a difference, starring the Falcon and the Teal, with special guest star, the Buzzard. A bird's eye view of flight. Stand by for takeoff. Wildlife 100, tonight at 7 on BBC One.
Tonight, privatising aspects of healthcare, but will it give the patient more choice? The row over a new relief road for Salisbury. And Pompey's new stadium, the fans' reaction to the plans. That's South Today at 6:30.
BBC Two's battening down the hatches in a couple of minutes for a seafaring drama starring Alan Ladd, 2 years before the mast. This is BBC One, where we now join Peter Sissons and Anna Ford for the 6 o'clock news.
Good evening. President Clinton orders an inquiry into the mass suicide at Waco as the FBI face recriminations over their handling of the disaster. The FBI say cult followers may have shot others trying to escape the inferno. 2 British survivors from the compound appear in court and face charges. Heavy fighting in central Bosnia as Muslims and Croats now fight pitched battles. The rail dispute, Mr. Knapp says there's the right atmosphere for talks. And the National Trust says deer hunting can continue on its land. As police in Texas begin the grim task of searching the ruins of the Waco compound, President Clinton promises an inquiry into how the 51-day siege came to end in tragedy with more than 80 people dead. He backed the actions of his Attorney General, Janet Reno, saying she did a good job. The FBI, whose tactics are now the subject of fierce controversy, suggested today that some of those who died may have been shot down by other followers of David Koresh as they tried to escape the mass suicide planned by the cult leader. Meantime, the 2 British men who survived the inferno have appeared in court. Rinos Avram and Derek Lovelock, with 3 other survivors, were charged with being material witnesses to a crime, which allows them to be held while an investigation continues. The FBI began their assault at 6 o'clock yesterday morning. An M60 tank smashed a hole in a wall of David Koresh's living quarters and started pumping in a non-flammable tear gas. At 9 a.m., the same tactic was used at the main entrance. Cult members responded with more than 200 rounds of small arms fire. The men's living area, women's dormitory and lookout tower were also targeted by the FBI, but at noon, federal agents saw cult members start fires at opposite ends of the compound buildings. The fire spread quickly. The ammunition dump exploded, and within an hour, the compound was reduced to rubble. Only 9 cult members, including 2 Britons, escaped the inferno.
The ghastly task of sifting through what's left of the compound began first thing this morning. Medical teams have been retrieving bodies. Identifying them will take a lot longer. 86 cult members are believed to have died in the fireball. Any hope that some might have survived in the maze of underground tunnels was quickly ruled out. 17 children were trapped in a second-floor dormitory, described by one survivor as the most difficult place to escape from. The FBI clearly miscalculated. As they moved in with tanks and tear gas, David Koresh triggered the mass suicide plan the authorities thought was a bluff. At news conferences late into yesterday evening, the FBI was forced again and again to defend their tactics.
I can't tell you the shock and the horror that all of us felt when we saw those flames coming out there. It was, oh my God, they're killing themselves.
But the strategy is facing a barrage of questions, not least why there were no fire engines in place, given Koresh's promises that he'd meet force with fire. Questions the Attorney General is also having to fend off. Janet Reno said she took full responsibility for events, and if President Clinton wanted her to resign, she would.
If that be the case, if that's what the president wants, I'm happy to do so. But I think in these situations, what's done is if somebody makes the best judgment they can, if they review everything carefully, if they are accountable to the people, if they proceed in an open and accountable way, people will know what they have tried to do.
Of the 9 survivors, 4 have been helicoptered to hospital. The other 5, including 2 Britons, were treated and then taken to a local prison. There, the British Vice-Consul met with them for nearly an hour. He said the Britons insisted they had no idea fires were being planned and said the compound was filled mainly with women and children. One of the injured in hospital is reported to have admitted starting the fires. So far, that's unconfirmed. All the survivors are being held as material witnesses to the original shootings in February. They're now witnesses to a list of murders of horrifying proportions. Matthew Amrediwala, BBC News, Waco in Texas.
The White House has said President Clinton takes full responsibility for the events leading to the fire and deaths at Waco. The spokeswoman said he was fully briefed and gave the go-ahead for the FBI operation. It was also made clear that the Attorney General, Janet Reno, would not be asked to resign.
He was told of the plan to end the siege and he approved it. This morning, Bill Clinton facing accusations of political misjudgments that are threatening to tarnish the image of his administration.
I think that they would have come out, and I think it would only have been a matter of a week or two beyond now. But why now? Why did they have to go in the way they did and literally ram into the kids' bedrooms and throw that tear gas in there? It just doesn't make sense.
Attorney General Janet Reno, who gave the go-ahead for the assault, has acknowledged miscalculations in the Waco operation. She's offered to resign if the president wants it.
I made the decision. I'm accountable. The buck stops with me, and nobody ever accused me of running from a decision that I made based on the best information that I had.
But for the White House, losing an Attorney General after only 3 months in office would be disastrous.
The President has absolutely no intention of asking for the Attorney General's resignation. He stands behind her 100%.
Much more likely to go is FBI Director William Sessions, a George Bush appointee whose career is already under a cloud. But Republicans in Congress may use the fiasco to attach blame to the president himself.
I think the entire Waco incident is something which the Judiciary Committee ought to be holding hearings on.
Ever since the days of Harry Truman, the White House has professed that the buck stops here. Bill Clinton isn't denying responsibility for the Waco disaster, but he is now involved in a damage limitation exercise to dodge the political fallout from an affair which seems to reveal bumbling inefficiency in his administration. Martin Sixsmith, BBC News, Washington.
The families and friends of those who died are trying to come to terms with the tragedy. Most of Koresh's British followers had been recruited from the Seventh-day Adventist Church in Nottingham and Manchester. Church members said the decision to torch the compound had been beyond belief. In the Commons, the Prime Minister rejected calls for legislation aimed at preventing organisations like the Branch Davidians from recruiting in this country.
Jeff Sellers is just one of the bereaved British relatives trying to understand how their loved ones ended up in the inferno of David Koresh's cult compound in Texas. Mr. Sellers' son Cliff died there yesterday.
He's been a very, very sensible lad all his life. It's just this quirk, looking into religion, has gone the wrong way. I think he was looking for something. I don't know. I don't think he knew himself what he was looking for. But he certainly hasn't found it there.
In North London, Vincent Nobrega is coming to terms with the death of his estranged wife Teresa at Waco. He at least has his daughter Natalie back at home. She was allowed to leave the sect last month. Mr. Nobrega tries to understand Koresh's power.
When he speaks to you, believe anything he says. He says he's the Messiah. He probably is, because, you know, his way, you know, he can put over things that nobody else I've met before can. You know, he's a real, well, I call him a con man, but, you know, they say he's Jesus, so I don't know what to say.
Christella Kyriakou thought at first she'd lost her brother, Renos Avram, but he did survive, fleeing the compound as it burned yesterday. He now faces legal proceedings in Texas. His sister wonders what kind of person has emerged.
But we've got to the stage where you spoke to him and he was speaking back to you in the words of the Bible, not normal speech. He was, well, completely brainwashed by it.
There were those who saw through David Koresh and escaped his influence. Tony Kakuri is back in the comfortably mundane surroundings of his North London market stall. He explains how cult members were virtually prisoners.
You just got trapped. You got this fear like, oh no, what this man is saying is true, and I can't pull out because God's gonna destroy me. He taught that God would kill anybody who rejects his message, and that he would kill you if you reject his message, and you just got paranoid.
Koresh and his followers broke away from the Seventh-day Adventists, but used knowledge of their doctrine to move in on churches like this one in Manchester and attract recruits.
If you're quoting the scriptures all the time, and the way they were telling them, you know, feeding them with information all the time from the word go, of course, after a period of time and attending the meetings all the time, of course they would be brainwashed.
Tomorrow, Seventh-day Adventist churches planned services for the dead, many of whom were former members. Laurie Margolis, BBC News.
Well, in the last hour at Waco, the FBI have been holding another news conference to deal with criticism about their handling of the siege. Here's part of what they had to say.
Those children are dead because David Koresh had them killed. There's no question about that. He had those fires started. He had 51 days to release those children. He chose those children to die. We didn't have anything to do with their deaths. Those fires were started in the compound by them. They were not allowed to leave, some of those who wanted to. We have some evidence, but again, it's inconclusive. There was gunfire when the fire started. There might have been people killed who were trying to get out of the compound.
Well, I'm joined now from Waco by our reporter, Matthew Amroliwala. Matthew, that clip from the FBI news conference suggests that what they're after are murder charges. They're not going to have anything of this talk of mass suicide.
No, they're not. They're being held at the moment, as you heard, on witnessing a crime, but more charges may well follow. They're being held, and obviously proceedings will now take their course. We saw in that press conference late this afternoon that the FBI yet again were reacting very, very strongly. They are quite aware of the growing criticism of their tactics used in this confrontation yesterday, and they've come out and made it quite plain that Koresh was preparing to come out with an armed conflict, and they decided to up the pressure, and Koresh then obviously organised for these fires. They say they have witnesses for that. There's no question about that, and he must take full responsibility for what had happened.
When are we likely to get a definite number for those who died in the fire?
Well, obviously that is very difficult. The proceedings here have been held up for most of this afternoon. We saw the medical teams arrive here early this morning, and they were preparing to go in, doctors and dentists, to retrieve the bodies, to actually begin to identify them and take them away from here. But they've had to actually stop their work. They haven't really been able to get started properly because the area is still considered very dangerous, and military experts, explosive experts, are still working out there to try and damp down the area, make it safe. They fear that ammunition rounds that from Koresh's arsenal may still go off, and so very little work, in fact, has actually been able to go on here, and therefore that process of retrieving and identifying the bodies and drawing up a list of the numbers who have perished here, that is going to take some considerable time.
Matthew Amroliwala at Waco, thank you very much.
Heavy fighting is continuing across central Bosnia as Muslim and Croat forces try to take more of each other's territory. At least 200 people have been killed since the weekend. In the Commons, the Prime Minister again warned against the dangers of military intervention. Refugees have asked British troops based at Vitez for protection, but British patrols can no longer get through to outlying villages near Vitez and Zenica because of the fighting.
Houses have been burning in the villages surrounding Vitez for several days, in full view of the British base on the town's outskirts. Ethnic cleansing, the Croats burning out Muslims, the Muslims retaliating where they can. The victims of this action can be seen in little groups, having lost everything, looking for safety. And safety is not available. The fighting is heavy and the destruction considerable. This is the centre of Vitez. A car bomb devastated several buildings. Seeing a British warrior approaching, a man gestures to the wreckage. His family is underneath it. He wants 4 bodies pulled out. Vitez was a thriving little town. Now no one is on the streets, except snipers. There's been continuous shelling and mortar fire. So far, the British base has not been hit, but shells have fallen nearby, and the British have sent out patrols to try and calm things down, but mainly to retrieve injured. The soldiers have seen a large number of bodies, lying by the roadside, in doorways and in houses, women and children, families, not fighting men. There was artillery fire on the large nearby town of Zenica yesterday, and 13 people in the marketplace were killed. Crowds have denied shelling the town. The fighting has been going on for 4 days and shows no sign of abating at the moment. The British base is still hearing shell and mortar fire, and more houses are alight on the hillsides. Kate Adey, BBC News, Bosnia.
Well, joining us now is our correspondent Martin Bell, who's in Vitez. He's been given details of widespread atrocities carried out by militia in the surrounding area. Martin, how bitter is this conflict between Muslim and Croat?
It is, according to the British commanding officer here, madness, as the chaos and havoc and destruction spread. Each side burning and shooting out the others' minorities. The latest casualty figures we have are something between 250 and 200 dead in the area around Vitez alone, and 300 injured, with many more casualties in other parts of central Bosnia. And there is no sign whatever this orgy of violence abating.
And is any one side more or less to blame than the other?
We've asked this repeatedly of those in a good position to know. They are reluctant to give the answer. But it does appear to be, part of the reason for this is that this area was declared to have been a largely Croatian area under the Vance Owen plan, and the Croats sort of moved in first to put their stamp on it and demand that their flag should fly. And that does seem to have sparked some of the trouble.
Martin Bell in Vitez, thank you very much. And, well, the time now 6:16, and still to come, 3 former policemen appear in court over the Guildford 4 case. It's alleged that they altered crucial interview notes. Plus, the new object on the edge of the solar system.
Government borrowing reached a new record last month of £9.5 billion. But the government says there's nothing in the figures to make it substantially revise its borrowing predictions for the new financial year. Labour accused ministers of complacency and said they should adopt emergency measures to bring down unemployment and get the economy moving.
Little more than a month has passed since the budget, and already the Chancellor's borrowing estimate for the financial year just ended has proved wayward by £1.5 billion. The deficit normally grows in March as government departments rush to complete their spending for the financial year. But £9.5 billion was much worse than expected, and it reveals the extent of the hole in the government's finances.